Every person who is always nice is hiding a part of themselves they've never allowed anyone to see. Carl Jung called this the shadow. Not a bad mood on a hard day. Not simple courtesy. Something quieter, older, and far more architectural than that a structure built in childhood that most people never examine. Because it doesn't look like a structure. It looks like their personality. Start with a child, maybe 8 years old, at a kitchen table where the air has gone tight. Two adults are arguing in the low, clipped tone that children learn to read faster than words. She doesn't understand the argument. What she understands is the room that when it gets like this, someone needs to make it stop feeling like this. So she does what has worked before. She says something funny. She asks a question that has nothing to do with anything. For a moment, the room exhales. And so does she. Here is the first thing worth noticing, before any theory. Nobody taught her this directly. No one sat her down and said, "Defuse the room." She discovered it the way a person discovers a light switch by accident in the dark, and then never forgetting where it is. Carl Jung had a name for what she's beginning to build. The persona, borrowed from the Latin word for a theatrical mask. He didn't consider this a flaw. Every person needs one. It's how a child learns what earns approval and what invites conflict, and how an adult later functions inside a family, a workplace, and a world that cannot accommodate every unfiltered impulse. Jung was specific about what the mask is actually for. It's built jointly to manage impression and to guard something more private, designed, in his words, to conceal the true nature of the individual. Concealment isn't an accident of the mask. It's the job. Here's the detail most accounts leave out. The persona isn't fake. The child's warmth at that table is real. She really can lighten a room. The danger Jung pointed to was never the mask itself. It's what happens when a person starts mistaking the mask for the whole of who they are. Jung described this as unfolding in stages. At first, wearing the persona is simply adaptive, a costume put on for the room and taken off elsewhere. The risk arrives later, when the costume stops coming off, when the ego quietly identifies with the persona instead of merely using it. The parts of a person that don't fit the mask don't get renegotiated. They get evicted. And an evicted feeling, in Jung's model, still has to live somewhere. There's another wrinkle. Jung didn't consider the persona purely personal, something each individual invents from scratch. He treated it as partly collective, a role supplied in advance by family and culture, worn by countless people before her. The specific niceness she perfected wasn't only her own invention. It was a costume already hanging in the family closet, and she was simply the one who happened to put it on and never take it off. Move forward 6 years. Same instinct, new setting, a group chat with its own quiet tensions. She's become the one people vent to, the reliable, unbothered one whose opinion is somehow never quite offered. One night, a friend asks her directly what she thinks about a decision that will hurt someone else in the group. She has an answer, a real one, and not a soft one. She says something agreeable instead and feels something small and specific happen in her chest. Not relief exactly. Closer to a door closing somewhere she can't quite locate. She won't remember this moment specifically in 10 years. That's the point. It isn't one decision. It's a pattern laying down track, one indistinguishable choice at a time. This is where Jung's theory asks its harder question. If the real answer, the real irritation, the real refusal keep getting rerouted, where do they actually go? His answer was that they don't disappear. In Jung's model, psychic material that isn't consciously expressed doesn't vanish because it's unwelcome. It moves into what he called the shadow, the reservoir of everything the presentable self has declined to own. Jung treated this as more than housekeeping for the psyche. He considered it morally serious. The shadow isn't just an impulse to suppress. It's something that challenges the whole personality because looking at it costs something. For Jung, repression isn't the absence of a feeling. It's the redirection of it. The irritation she didn't voice doesn't stop existing. It goes somewhere with less light and less structure. And it does not stay inert once it's there. He also described a principle called enantiodromia, the tendency of a psychological attitude, when pushed to an extreme, to turn into its opposite. A personality organized entirely around agreeableness isn't necessarily stable. The more rigidly one side is maintained, the more force accumulates on the side that's been excluded. 15 years later, she's good at her job in the specific way people mean when they say someone is easy to work with. She takes the extra task nobody else wants. She's the one who says, "Sure, no problem," to unreasonable deadlines, and usually means it. If you asked her coworkers to describe her, you'd hear the same words again and again. Calm, dependable, low maintenance. Nobody would describe her as someone holding anything back, because from where they're standing, there's no evidence that she is. That gap between how she appears and what she's actually carrying isn't a contradiction. It's the story itself. Yet some nights, driving home alone, she grips the steering wheel harder than the traffic requires. Once, while waiting at a red light, she slammed her hand against the dashboard over something so small she couldn't explain it even 5 minutes later. The next morning, she returned to work as the same calm, agreeable person everyone expected. Jung had a name for this too: compensation. The unconscious doesn't simply sit behind the persona. It constantly tries to balance whatever the conscious personality has pushed too far in one direction. A life built entirely on being agreeable doesn't create a person who is agreeable all the way through. It creates pressure, and that pressure eventually finds an outlet. That's why the outburst in the car wasn't really about traffic. It was the unconscious expressing what the conscious mind had refused to express for years. Jung paid close attention to dreams for exactly this reason. He believed dreams bypass the persona and reveal what the conscious mind refuses to acknowledge. Someone who appears calm all day may still dream of arguments, confrontation, or rebellion. Not because the mind is broken, but because it is trying to restore balance. Most people would simply call these moments stress. Jung would ask a different question: stress about what? And why does it only appear when nobody else is watching? This pattern often extends into relationships. She's consistently drawn to people who say exactly what they think without worrying about how the room will react. At first, that honesty feels magnetic. She admires how naturally They speak their minds. But over time, admiration slowly becomes irritation. The same directness that once attracted her now feels selfish, harsh, even insensitive. She finds herself trying to soften them, calm them, or become the peacemaker. Jung believed this reaction often comes from projection. The qualities that fascinate us or frustrate us the most in others are often the qualities we've rejected within ourselves. The directness she cannot express doesn't disappear. Instead, she encounters it in someone else. One day she admires it. Another day she resents it. The person hasn't changed. What changes is her relationship with the part of herself she refuses to own. Years later, another family dinner arrives. A familiar comment is made. Normally, she would smile, laugh, or change the subject. This time, she doesn't. She calmly says what she actually thinks. It isn't cruel. It isn't loud. It's simply honest. Silence fills the room for a few seconds. To everyone else, nothing dramatic has happened. But inside her, two emotions arrive at the same time: relief and guilt. Neither one fully replaces the other. Jung wouldn't have considered this strange. The moment a person allows the shadow a small place in conscious life, it can feel both liberating and uncomfortable. That's because the persona has spent years convincing us that any honest expression is dangerous. But Jung never argued that the answer was becoming rude, aggressive, or careless. His goal wasn't to destroy the persona. It was to integrate the shadow. Integration means recognizing that anger, disagreement, boundaries, and honesty are not enemies of kindness. They are part of being psychologically whole. Real maturity isn't pretending those parts don't exist. It's becoming conscious of them, so they no longer control you from the shadows. For Jung, this wasn't a one-time achievement. It was a lifelong process. The goal was never perfection. The goal was wholeness. So perhaps the real question isn't whether you should stop being nice. Perhaps the better question is this: how much of yourself have you hidden just to make everyone else comfortable? Because the parts of yourself you continue to reject never truly disappear. They simply wait in the shadows until you're finally willing to meet them.